Let me say, first of all, how incredibly moving it was to walk down Institutska Street and to have a chance to be able to pay my respects on behalf of President Obama and the American people at the site of last month's deadly shootings. It was really quite remarkable. I have to tell you, to see the barricades, see the tires, see the barbed wire, see the bullet holes in street lamps, the extraordinary number of flowers, the people still standing beside a barrel with a fire to keep them warm, the shrouded vision in the clouds and the fog of the buildings from which the shots came, and the pictures, the photographs of those who lost their lives, of the people who put themselves on the line for the future of Ukraine. It was deeply moving to walk into a group of Ukrainians spontaneously gathered there and to listen to them, to listen to their pleas of passion for the right not to go back to life as it was under former President Yanukovych. One woman who pleadingly said how poor they were, how the rich lived well, and how those in power took the money and how they were left behind. And particularly one man who told me that he had recently traveled to Australia and he had come back here, but he came back determined to be able to live as he had seen other people live in other parts of the world. So it was very moving, and it gave me a deep personal sense of how closely linked the people of Ukraine are to not just Americans, but to people all across the world who today are asking for their rights, asking for the privilege to be able to live, defining their own nation, defining their futures. That's what this is about. The United States extends our deepest condolences to those whose grief is still very fresh, and those who lost loved ones, who bravely battled against snipers on rooftops and people armed against them with weapons they never dreamt of having. These brave Ukrainians took to the streets in order to stand peacefully against tyranny and to demand democracy. So instead, they were met with snipers who picked them off one after the other as people of courage, notwithstanding the bullets, went out to get them, drag them to safety, give them comfort, expose themselves. They raised their voices for dignity and for freedom. But what they stood for so bravely, I say with full conviction, will never be stolen by bullets or by invasions. It cannot be silenced by thugs from rooftops. It is universal, it's unmistakable, and it's called freedom. So today, in another part of this country, we're in a new phase of the struggle for freedom. And the United States reaffirms our commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity according to international law. We condemn the Russian Federation's act of aggression, and we have throughout this moment evidence of a great transformation taking place, and in that transformation we will stand with the people of Ukraine. Today, Ukrainians are demanding a government with the consent of the people. And I have to say that we all greatly admire the restraint that the transitional government has shown as it makes this transition. They have shown restraint. Despite an invasion of Ukrainian homeland and a Russian government that has chosen aggression and intimidation as a first resort. The contrast really could not be clearer. Determined Ukrainians demonstrating strength through unity, and the Russian government, out of excuses, hiding its hand behind falsehoods, intimidation, and provocations. In the hearts of Ukrainians and the eyes of the world, there is nothing strong about what Russia is doing. So it's time to set the record straight. The Russian government would have you believe it was the opposition who failed to implement the February 21st agreement that called for a peaceful transition, ignoring the reality that it was Yanukovych who, when history came calling, when his country was in need, when this city was the place where the action was, where the leaders of the nation were gathered in order to decide the future, he broke his obligation to sign that agreement, and he fled into the night with his possessions, destroying papers behind him. He abandoned his people and eventually his country. The Russian government would have you believe that the Ukraine government somehow is illegitimate or led by extremists, ignoring the reality that the Rada, representing the people of Ukraine, the elected representatives of the people of Ukraine, they overwhelmingly approved the new government, even with members of Yanukovych's party deserting him and voting overwhelmingly in order to approve this new government. It was thanks in parts to the votes from Yanukovych's own party that the future of Ukraine changed. And today the Rada is the most representative institution in Ukraine. The Russian government would also have you believe that the calm and friendly streets, one of which I walked down, but many of which I just drove through, that somehow these streets of Kiev are actually dangerous, ignoring the reality that there has been no surge in crime, no surge in looting, no political retribution here. The Russian government would have you believe, against all the evidence, that there have been mass defections of Ukrainians to Russia, or that there have been mass attacks on churches in eastern Ukraine. That hasn't happened either. They would have you believe that ethnic Russians and Russian bases are threatened. They'd have you believe that Kiev is trying to destabilize Crimea, or that Russian actions are legal or legitimate because Crimean leaders invited intervention. And as everybody knows, the soldiers in Crimea, at the instruction of their government, have stood their ground but never fired a shot, never issued one provocation, have been surrounded by an invading group of troops, and have seen an individual who got 3% of the vote installed as the so-called leader by the Russians. They would have you believe that Kiev is trying to destabilize Crimea, or that somehow Russian leaders invited intervention. Not a single piece of credible evidence supports any one of these claims. None. And the larger point is really this. It is diplomacy and respect for sovereignty, not unilateral force, that can best solve disputes like this in the 21st century. President Obama and I want to make it clear to Russia and to everybody in the world that we are not seeking confrontation. There's a better way for Russia to pursue its legitimate interests in Ukraine. If you are legitimately worried about some of your citizens, then go to the government, talk to them about it. Go to the UN, raise the issue in the Security Council. Go to the OSCE. raised it in one of the human rights organizations. There are countless outlets that an organized, structured, decent world has struggled to put together to resolve these differences so we don't see a nation unilaterally invade another nation. There's a better way for Russia to pursue its legitimate interests in Ukraine. Russia can choose to comply with international law and honor its commitments under the Helsinki Final Act under the United Nations Charter. If it wants to help protect ethnic Russians, as it purports to, and if they were threatened, we would support efforts to protect them, as would, I am told, the government of Ukraine. But if they want to do that, Russia could work with the legitimate government of Ukraine, which it has pledged to do. It cannot only permit, but must encourage international monitors to deploy throughout Ukraine. These are the people who could actually identify legitimate threats. And we are asking, together with the government of Ukraine, together with the European community, for large numbers of observers to be able to come in here and monitor the situation and be the arbiters of truth versus fiction. Russia, if it wanted to help de-escalate this situation, could return its troops to the barracks, live by the 1997 base agreement, and de-escalate rather than expand their invasion. Now, we would prefer that. I come here today at the instruction of President Obama to make it absolutely clear the United States of America would prefer to see this de-escalated. We would prefer to see this managed through the structures of legal institutions, international institutions that we've worked many years in order to be able to deal with this kind of crisis. But if Russia does not choose to de-escalate, if it is not willing to work directly with the government of Ukraine, as we hope they will be, then our partners will have absolutely no choice but to join us to continue to expand upon steps we have taken in recent days in order to isolate Russia politically, diplomatically, and economically. I would emphasize to the leaders of Russia, this is not something we are seeking to do. This is something Russia's choices may force us to do. So far, we have suspended participation in the preparations for the Sochi G8 summit. We have suspended military contacts, and we have suspended bilateral economic dialogue. And we are prepared to take further steps if Russia does not return its forces to the barracks and engage in a legitimate policy of de-escalation. At the same time, the United States and its partners, our partners, will support Ukraine. We will support it as it takes difficult steps to deal with its economy. And I appreciate the meeting that I just had with the acting president and the prime minister and other leaders as we discussed how to strengthen the economy and move rapidly towards free, fair, open elections that can take place very shortly. We are working closely and will continue to work closely with the IMF team and with international partners in order to develop an assistance package to help Ukraine restore financial stability in the short run and to be able to grow its economy in the long run. I'm pleased to say that this package includes an immediate $1 billion in a loan guarantee to support Ukraine's recovery, and we are currently working with the Treasury Department of the United States and with others to lay out a broader, more comprehensive plan. We will provide the best expertise available to help Ukraine's economy and financial institutions repair themselves and to work towards these free, fair, fast, inclusive elections. We're also working with the interim government to help combat corruption and to recover stolen assets. And we are helping Ukraine to cope with Russia's politically motivated trade practices, whether it's manipulating the energy supply or banning the best chocolates made in Ukraine. The fact is, this is the 21st century, and we should not see nations step backwards to behave in 19th or 20th century fashion. There are ways to resolve these differences. Great nations choose to do that appropriately. The fact is that we believe that there are a set of options available to Russia and to all of us that could move us down a road of appropriate diplomacy, appropriate diplomatic engagement. We invite Russia to come to that table. We particularly invite Russia to engage directly with the government of Ukraine, because I am confident they are prepared to help work through these issues in a thoughtful way. I'm very proud to be here in Ukraine. Like so many Americans and other people around the world, we've watched with extraordinary awe the power of individuals unarmed except with ideas, people with beliefs and principles and values who have reached for freedom, for equality, for opportunity. There's nothing more important in this world. That is what drives change in so many parts of the world today. It's really partly why the world is in such a state of transformation in so many different places at the same time. Because we're all connected. We all understand what other people are doing and the choices they have and the lives they get to lead. And all over the world, young people are saying, we do not want to be deprived of those opportunities. That's what this is about. And it is about all those who value democracy and who support the opportunity for this country to join the legions of others who want to practice it. The United States will stand by the Ukrainian people as they build the strong, sovereign, and democratic country that they deserve, and that their countrymen and women just so recently gave their lives in extraordinarily courageous acts in order to ensure for the future. We must all step up and answer their call. I'm happy to take some questions.
Great, thank you. The first question is from Andrea Mitchell of NBC. There's a microphone coming.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, U.S. officials have been saying that Vladimir Putin will be isolated by his actions. Yet today, he seemed defiant. Speaking for an hour, taking questions, he said, among other things, that Russia reserves the right to take any action to use any means, obviously military means. He described events here as an unconstitutional coup. He denied that there were any Russian troops in Crimea, occupying Crimea. He blamed the crisis on United States interference, saying that the U.S.
He really denied there were troops in Crimea?
Yes, he did. He also blamed the crisis on the United States, saying that the United States was acting as though it were conducting an experiment across the ocean on lab animals, on rats here. And he showed no sign of being ready to step down or de-escalate the military presence in Crimea. There have been shots fired today. There's the president's reporting of naval Russian ships along the isthmus between Ukraine and Crimea. So with all of that, how has the U.S. pressure worked against it? And what is the reaction to his assertions? And also, while you were here, you met with many leaders. You did not meet with Yulia Tymoshenko. Is she viewed by the United States as not part of the solution, or is possibly part of the problem?
Well, let me answer the last part of the question first. Not at all. I thought I actually might bump into her, but I didn't. I had the meetings with the current group that represent the parties that have come together, and most likely presidential candidates at this moment with whom I've been in touch and working with. I met with a number of them in Munich previously, and so we continued that conversation. But with respect to President Putin's comments, You know, I've spoken as directly to President Putin today as I can to invite him to engage in a legitimate and appropriate dialogue, particularly with the current government of Ukraine, knowing that there's an election in 90 days and the people of Ukraine will have an opportunity to ratify their future leadership. The fact is that in the eastern part of the country, Russia recently tried to get a couple of city councils to actually pass something asking for Russians to come in. And lo and behold, those councils did the opposite. They said, we don't want Russia to come in. We want our independence. And I think that it is clear that Russia has been working hard to create a pretext for being able to invade further. Russia has talked about Russian-speaking minority citizens who are under siege. They're not. And in fact, this government has acted remarkably responsibly by urging total calm, by not wanting to have any provocation, by avoiding even their troops who have a legal right to resist the invasion of other troops, but has ordered them not to engage to give a pretext of anybody being in danger. Here in the streets today, I didn't see anybody who feels threatened, except for the potential of an invasion by Russia. So I would hope that President Putin, who, you know,
Okay, we're going to shift gears right now, go to President Obama, who's at an event in Washington right now. He is also speaking about the Ukraine, so let's listen to the President.
Through international mechanisms. And we're prepared to make sure that the rights of all Ukrainians are upheld. And in fact, in conversations that we've had with the government in Kiev, they have been more than willing to work with the international community and with Russia to provide such assurances. So the fact that we are still seeing soldiers out of their barracks in Crimea is an indication to which what's happening there is not based on actual concern for Russian nationals or Russian speakers inside of Ukraine, but is based on Russia seeking through force to exert influence on a neighboring country. That is not how international law is supposed to operate. I would also note just you know, the way that some of this has been reported, that the suggestion somehow that the Russian actions have been clever strategically. I actually think that this has not been a sign of strength, but rather is a reflection that countries near Russia have deep concerns and suspicions about this kind of meddling, and if anything, it will push many countries further away from Russia. There is the ability for Ukraine to be a friend of the West's and a friend of Russia's, as long as none of us are inside of Ukraine trying to meddle and intervene, certainly not militarily, with decisions that properly belong to the Ukrainian people. And that's the principle that John Kerry is going to be speaking to during his visit. I'll be making additional calls today to some of our key foreign partners, and I suspect I'll be doing that all week and in through the weekend. But as I indicated yesterday, the course of history is for people to want to be free to make their own decisions about their own futures. And the international community, I think, is unified in believing that it is not the role of an outside force where there's been no evidence of serious violence, where there's been no rationale under international law to intervene in people trying to determine their own destiny. So we stand on the side of history that I think more and more people around the world deeply believe in, the principle that a sovereign people and independent people are able to make their own decisions about their own lives. And Mr. Putin can throw a lot of words out there, but the facts on the ground indicate that right now he's not abiding by that principle. There is still the opportunity for Russia to do so, working with the international community to help stabilize the situation. And we've sent a clear message that we are prepared to work with anybody if their genuine interest is making sure that Ukraine is able to govern itself. And as I indicated before, and something that I think has not been emphasized enough, they are currently scheduled to have elections in May. And everybody in the international community should be invested in making sure that the economic deterioration that's happened in Ukraine stops, but also that these elections proceed in a fair and free way in which all Ukrainians, including Russian speakers inside of Ukraine, are able to express their choice of who should lead them. And if we have a strong, robust, legitimate election, then there shouldn't be any question as to whether the Ukrainian people are govern themselves without the kinds of outside interference that we see Russia exerting. All right? Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, that was President Obama in Washington, D.C. He was speaking about the situation in Ukraine.